I swore I'd destroy their love. It sounds brutal now, but back then it made perfect sense. I was Richard Stanford, a man who'd built an empire on grit, calculation, and sacrifice. Emotions. Love. They were liabilities, distractions that weakened men, and my business partner James was falling hard. When I saw him with Lena, saw that genuine happiness on his face, I knew it had to end. Love wasn't part of the plan. I planted doubts, stirred up old relationships, and pulled every string to break them apart. I thought I was saving him. But in trying to tear down their love, I started to unravel myself. A personal tragedy struck, and suddenly I saw the price of my ambition. Now I'm left with nothing but the truth of what I did, and the question that haunts me: was it ever worth it? It all started on a crisp autumn day in New York City. The leaves were turning golden, much like the money I was obsessed with accumulating. I remember watching James Walker, my business partner, laughing with a stunning woman at a coffee shop across from our office. Her name, I would later learn, was Lena Collins. There was something about the way James looked at her, a look of genuine happiness and ease that I'd never seen on his face, not even when we celebrated our most successful deals. He seemed lighter, as if just being around her was enough to strip away the weight of our demanding world. It terrified me. James had always been the pragmatic one, the brilliant strategist who helped steer our company to new heights. And in my world, love was a liability, a distraction. Emotions were unpredictable, messy. They got in the way of what truly mattered: profit and power. James was my most valuable asset, and I couldn't afford to lose him to some whimsical romance that had no place in the cutthroat world we navigated daily. I watched them from afar, memories of my own failed relationships flickering like ghosts. My ex-wife's tearful plea for attention, my son's quiet disappointment as I missed another one of his school plays. My relentless pursuit of success had cost me dearly, but I told myself it was worth it. It had to be. So when I saw James softening, I felt an instinctive urge to protect what we had built. I convinced myself that his relationship with Lena would only end in disaster, dragging him and our business down with it. At first, my actions were subtle. I dropped little comments here and there, harmless observations that I hoped would sow doubt. Lena's world is so different from ours, isn't it? Can't imagine her fitting in with our clients. James would just laugh, brushing off my words with a shake of his head. But I could see the seed planted, and I waited. But as their relationship deepened, so did my unease. James began to change in ways I never expected. He spoke less about profits and more about art, about finding meaning beyond the constant chase for more. It wasn't just talk. He seemed genuinely happy, fulfilled. I convinced myself that this transformation would be his undoing. So my subtle hints turned into more active interference. I arranged meetings during their planned dates, forced him into late-night work sessions, ensuring he'd miss important moments with Lena. At first, it worked. I could see the frustration in Lena's eyes every time James was late or had to cancel a dinner. But despite the cracks I was trying to force between them, their love was resilient. So I escalated. That's when I brought Karen back into the picture. Karen was James's ex-girlfriend, a no-nonsense financial executive who had been his steady companion for years before they ended things. I believed she was the right fit for James, someone who understood our world of deals and dollars. So I orchestrated casual encounters, making sure Lena wasn't around. A coffee here, a late business dinner there. It wasn't long before the old chemistry between James and Karen began to resurface. Or so I thought. Meanwhile, my obsession with breaking them apart was taking its toll on me, though I refused to acknowledge it. I had become consumed by this need to control James's life, to keep him focused on the company. But deep down, something had started to shift. For the first time in my career, I wasn't chasing profits. I was chasing control, trying to manipulate emotions I didn't even understand. The guilt gnawed at me late at night. I'd lie awake, unable to shake the image of Lena's smile fading as she became more distant from James. But I told myself it was necessary. I was saving our business, protecting our future. If James lost his edge, we'd both be ruined. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Then came the financial crisis I engineered. my master stroke of deception. I created a situation within the firm where key figures wouldn't add up, making it seem as if James had made a critical error in judgment. The fallout was swift. Our board questioned James's decision-making, clients expressed doubts, and the pressure mounted. The confident man I had known for years began to unravel. I watched, waiting for the cracks between James and Lena to widen into a full rupture. The weight of the crisis bore down on them both. James, once sure of himself, began to question everything. Lena tried to stand by his side, but the strain was clear. I saw how her eyes would flicker with worry every time James snapped at her, his temper fraying under the stress. It was then I made my final move. I cornered Lena one evening outside her design studio. I faked concern, playing the role of the worried friend. "I hate to tell you this, Lena, but James has been spending a lot of time with Karen lately. I think there might be something between them again." I watched her face pale, the hurt swimming in her eyes. For a moment I felt victorious. I had finally driven the wedge between them. But that feeling was short-lived, because only days later I received the phone call that would turn my entire world upside down. It was my ex-wife. My son had been in a car accident, serious enough that he was in critical condition. My heart stopped as I heard the words, my hands trembling as I rushed to the hospital. Everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed for, seemed meaningless in that moment. My son was fighting for his life, and I wasn't even sure he knew how much I loved him. I arrived at the hospital, my mind spinning with guilt and fear. I had spent so many years chasing after success, believing that providing for him financially was enough. But in that sterile waiting room, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the cold fluorescent lights, I realized how hollow my life had become. I had nothing, no one to lean on, no family to turn to in my darkest hour. All I had was regret. Hours passed, each one an eternity. Then, as dawn broke through the windows, I saw a figure approaching. It was James. He had heard about the accident and come, despite everything I had done to him. He didn't say much at first, just sat beside me in the waiting room, the silence between us heavy. I couldn't look him in the eye. How could I? After everything I had done to sabotage his life, he was still here, offering me support. The guilt became unbearable. I had to confess. I told him everything, about Karen, about the crisis I had engineered, about my attempts to destroy his relationship with Lena. The words tumbled out of me, and with each one I expected him to walk away, to leave me in the pit I had dug for myself. But he didn't. James listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When I finally finished, my heart hammering in my chest, he spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Richard, what you did, it's hard for me to even understand. You hurt me, you hurt Lena. You jeopardized everything we've worked for." I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. I had never felt so small, so ashamed. "But," James continued, "I can see that you're suffering. And I know that deep down, you're not the same man who did those things. You've changed." I stared at him in disbelief. "You forgive me?" He sighed, nodding slowly. "Yes, Richard, I forgive you. Not because what you did was right, but because I believe in second chances, and I believe you can make this right somehow." His forgiveness was like a lifeline, pulling me out of the darkness I had been sinking into. I didn't deserve it, but I clung to it all the same. After that, everything changed. My son survived the accident, a miracle in itself, and it was a wake-up call I desperately needed. I couldn't go back to the life I had been living. I had to make amends, not just to James and Lena, but to myself, to the people I had neglected, to the family I had pushed away in my relentless pursuit of success. The first step was facing Lena. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, standing on her doorstep, knowing the pain I had caused her. When she opened the door, her eyes wary and guarded, I almost turned and fled. But I had to do this. I had to be honest. "Lena," I began, my voice shaky, "I need to tell you the truth. About everything." She let me in, though her expression remained cold. We sat in her living room, surrounded by the warmth of her art-filled space. I could feel the weight of her eyes on me as I confessed my sins. How I had manipulated James, how I had spread lies about Karen, how I had tried to drive them apart. When I finished, the silence that followed was suffocating. I could see the hurt in her eyes, the betrayal etched into her features. "Why?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this to us?" I struggled for words, unsure how to explain the fear and insecurity that had driven me. I thought I was protecting the company. I thought James was losing focus. I was scared of what would happen if he changed too much. Lena shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "You didn't trust us. You didn't trust that we could make it work." I had no response. She was right. I had underestimated their love, their resilience. "I can't forgive you," she said after a long pause. "Not yet. But I appreciate that you came to tell me the truth. That means something." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start, and that was all I could hope for. Over the next few months, I worked tirelessly to undo the damage I had caused. I reached out to clients, colleagues, anyone who had heard my whispered doubts about James's competence. I set the record straight, piece by piece, rebuilding the trust I had shattered. James and Lena, too, began to heal, though it wasn't easy for them. The trust I had broken didn't mend overnight. There were still moments of doubt, of anger, but their love proved stronger than the damage I had inflicted. And as for me, I began to rebuild my own life. I stepped down from the firm, realizing that the man I had become in that world wasn't someone I wanted to be anymore. I started a non-profit organization using my connections to help young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. It was my way of giving back, of trying to make up for the years I had spent chasing the wrong kind of success. I'll never forget the day James and Lena invited me to dinner at their new home. It was a small gesture, but to me it was everything. A sign that despite everything, they were willing to let me back into their lives. Their home was a perfect blend of their two worlds. James's love for clean lines and modern aesthetics, mixed with Lena's creative bohemian flair. As we sat down to eat, I felt a warmth that I hadn't felt in years. This was what life was supposed to be about. Love, connection, friendship. Not the cold, empty pursuit of power I had once believed in. "You know," James said, raising his glass in a toast, "in a strange way, we owe our happiness to you, Richard." I blinked, confused. "How do you figure that?" Lena smiled, reaching for James's hand. "If it weren't for everything that happened, we might not have realized how strong our love really is. We might have taken it for granted." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "I'm just glad I didn't succeed in tearing you apart." "You didn't," James said firmly. "In fact, you brought us closer together. But now, Richard, it's time for you to forgive yourself." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on making amends, on proving myself worthy of their forgiveness, that I hadn't realized I was still holding on to my own guilt. The journey to redemption wasn't just about earning their forgiveness. It was about forgiving myself. It wasn't easy. It took time, and there were days when I doubted whether I could ever truly make up for what I had done. But with their support, and with the work I was doing to help others, I began to heal. Today, as I look back on everything, I realize how far I've come. I'm not the man I used to be, and for that, I'm grateful. But more than that, I've learned that true success isn't measured in profits or power. It's measured in the lives we touch, the love we nurture, and the change we bring to the world. That, in the end, is what truly matters. And that's my story. I tried to tear love apart, and in the end, it saved me. Now I'm curious. Do you think I was justified, trying to protect my business, or was I completely wrong? Can people really change, or do our mistakes define us forever? Hit like if this story hit home, and make sure to follow for more like this. There's also an exclusive playlist with other powerful stories of redemption and second chances. Check it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let's talk about it.